Mothers Collective. So alhamdulillah, I'm going to ask you to jump in, Faria, inshallah. Okay, so let's start off. رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقهوا قولي. اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد وعلى سيدنا محمد. Okay, so our topic for tonight is communication, right? Now, what's the reason that communication is so important to us? Just going to put this question out there. Share with me, why is communication so important? What does it do for us?
It helps us understand one another.
It helps us understand one another. Mm-hmm.
We live in a community, and in a community, there's a bunch of different people who come from different backgrounds, different thought processes, for everything. So it helps us communicate with each other and live together, essentially.
Yeah, live together, diverse perspectives, understand by knowing each other. Mm-hmm. What else is there? What's the reason communication is so important to you?
It's a survival instinct.
Survival instinct. Tell me more. What do you mean?
If I need something, if I don't ask for it, then how am I supposed to receive it?
Mm-hmm. So it's a way to ask for help. It's a way for us to connect. Absolutely. All of these reasons. And we are, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala made us interdependent, right? We can't sit here and live completely independent on our own, nor when we become super dependent on each other, is that a healthy way to live, right? But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala made us to where we need each other. We can help each other. We can understand. We can grow together. Things that we can do together, we cannot really do on our own many times, right? So it's really important. And one of those ways is communication. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in Surah Rahman described, right? Ar-Rahman, allama al-Quran, khalaqa al-insan, allamahu al-bayan. Bayan. After he described, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, Ar-Rahman, the most compassionate. And then he talked about the Quran. And then he described creating us. And then speech. This is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's mercy. Through speech, we're able to connect with each other. And through speech, this is a big mercy from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, where our hearts connect, where we get some closeness and belongingness. We feel seen and heard, right? These are really, really important things for us. So communication is super duper important. And yet we find ourselves again and again having these barriers, right, in communicating. We perhaps need something from each other. And it's so hard to be vulnerable. It requires vulnerability. It requires some discomfort sometimes to communicate, to ask for help, right? Or to describe what we're really feeling. So can y'all tell me about some of the barriers that come for you guys in communicating? Think about like your work. Think about your family. Or perhaps some of you are married or have been married. Mm-hmm. What are some barriers?
At least with my parents, or just I guess with anyone, like miscommunication is always like I think when communicating, if someone is not listening in like in detail, like there can be a lot of miscommunication, and then
yeah,
and we can and I guess there can be arguments, so that can be the wrong form of communication.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
So there's misunderstandings and it leads to arguments, the opposite of what we're trying to do. We're trying to connect and feel understood, and instead there's arguments that can flare up, right? Mm-hmm.
Jumping to conclusions.
Jumping to conclusions. Give me an example if you have one.
So let's say that we're discussing about something, friends, family. Perhaps the other person, if you suggest something negative, will immediately jump to his own conclusion, not realizing that wasn't what you intended.
Mm-hmm.
What you intended.
Okay, so it sounds like you're saying that somebody already had this preconceived notion, right? Like they're already thinking something, and then instead of hearing where you're coming from, they've already thought about what it was going to be. They already have an idea and have pegged you or what you're about to talk about, right? And that can be frustrating. What are some other barriers to really feeling heard and being seen that maybe you guys have experienced? Anything else that comes up for you? Mm-hmm.
Being judged.
Being judged. Being judged for what you're about to say. That can be very scary, right? It can be intimidating. And so communicating, thinking about that, jumping to conclusions or the risk of arguments or being labeled or misunderstood, it's natural for us to feel a little intimidated and scared, right? It requires a sense of courage and vulnerability to communicate. Absolutely. And you know what happens? A lot of times when we are trying to talk to each other, especially when it's about difficult things, we can kind of have our defense mechanisms on, or we're coming from like our egos sometimes. Let me relate that to like, when it comes to our states of our levels of spiritual states. So there are 3 states that are described, 3 stages of development and spiritual maturity. So the lowest level is called nafs al-amara bisu, right? And then there's nafs al-lawama, which is above that. And then the highest state that we really all try to, that's where we want to be, is nafs al-mutma'inna. So let me describe what that is. Nafs al-amara bisu, the lowest level, that's where it's called the commanding self, right? It's this unbridled, untamed, like hedonistic place where you're usually kind of oblivious to yourself and oblivious to others. You're in this mindless state, right? And you're just living through what gives me pleasure, what makes me feel good, right? Not necessarily what's good for me or healthy for me or for my relationships or my relationship with Allah, but just whatever feels good. And you're just going according to that. And when we speak from this state, from being mindless, what we're really doing is we're arguing to win, right? So this lowest level, this lowest state, when we're talking from this state, usually what it sounds like is you have those preconceived notions, or when somebody's trying to describe something to you, you're already thinking of arguments on your own because you just want to win. You want to be right. Okay. Now, when we're talking about nafsul lawama, which is the state above, this state is a little bit different because now we're moving up from mindlessness to being more mindful. And in this state, we start to think about what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala commands of us, what his mandates are, what he's wanting for us to be better, right? And so we may start to feel some healthy shame. We might start to feel some guilt when when we're off track, when we're not aligned with what's right and what's helpful. And so we may feel uneasy when we do something wrong. We make mistakes, right? And so it's this battle between that first state, that hedonistic state, where we keep making mistakes and going back, and then this state where you're like, no, I really want to please Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and do well. And so when we speak from this state, oftentimes this is going to sound like we are perhaps arguing or communicating to be understood, right? We want, please understand where I'm coming from. This is not what I meant, right? So we're talking to try to make the other person understand, or maybe even to understand the other person. Now, this highest state, give me a second. My mouth is drying up, y'all. Okay, so this highest state, nafsul mutma'inna. In Urdu, there's this word mutma'in. It means satisfied, right? And so it means contentment. This is this tranquil state. And how do we achieve this state? This is not just saved for like, prophets and saints. This is something we can achieve. Now, we may fluctuate between these states, right? But through what our actions are and what our intentions are. But this highest state, nafsul mutma'inna, it comes from being so aware of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It comes from wanting to please him. And it gives us pleasure to be and doing what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's mandates are, right? What he requires of us. And whatever he requires is so that in this world and the next, we actually are able to be our best versions. We are able to be closer to him. It is a ways of reaching contentment. Okay. So when we're speaking from this state, we're speaking to heal. We're speaking to connect, right? This is the state we're coming from. So let's kind of compare the 3 states again. The lowest state, nafsul amara bisu, that hedonistic state, we are communicating, we are arguing to what? to win, right? We're arguing to win. That second state, nafsul lawama, where we're starting to kind of have this internal battle, right? We often see like on the screen, like there's the angel on your shoulder and the shaitan on the other shoulder. That's not accurate, but like when they're showing that battle, that's kind of what it's like. When we're speaking from this state, what are we speaking from again? What are we trying to do? We're arguing to understand. And then the last state, when we're speaking from this state, we are trying to speak from a state of connecting and healing. So this is important because when we're actually talking, for us to kind of take a moment, be mindful, and kind of see what's going on right now, that requires a pause. That requires us to kind of slow down. That requires some discomfort even. Many of us become very, very uncomfortable in describing what our needs are or to communicate, because there's a risk that we might hurt the other person's feelings, or we kind of feel like we're burdening them. How many people can kind of relate to that, to feeling like a burden, or feeling like I don't want to make the other person uncomfortable, so maybe I'll keep this to myself. So for example, yeah, so I see a hand raised, right? Like sometimes even asking for something that is reasonable can feel like too much. It can feel like, I don't know if I want to ask this because the other person may not respond well. Like say you've been working really hard at your workplace and you really deserve that, that raise, or perhaps you're just trying to take some of those, you've been overtasked with too many things. And so you want to talk to your boss about this, but instead you just keep taking on more and more and don't ask for a raise. You just keep taking on more. And usually when I ask my clients, like, what's going on here, right? It's because it's like, it's going to be uncomfortable. I don't know if I want to burden the other person, my boss, right? Or I don't know if they're going to be like, do you really, there might be an argument, or they'll come back with another something else, right? But the thing is, this is part and parcel. When we're wanting to communicate, we have to kind of own and kind of settle into the discomfort, and that's okay. Another thing that I wanted to describe about communication is this is a way for us. This is actually sharing good words, sharing kind words is actually charity. It's a sadaqah. For many of us, and it's not just words, right? Let me ask you guys, like when you think of communication, what are some aspects of communication that come to mind? What are components of communicating? How do we do that? What are some components? How do y'all communicate? I mean, are you guys just sign languaging? Like what's going on? What are y'all doing? You use your words, you talk, you email, you text. Yeah.
Body language.
Your body language,
Tone.
your tone of voice. Your words, exactly. When we're communicating, it's done through so many different things. It's done through eye contact. It's done through your tone of voice. Like, what? Are you sure? Right? That can, and sometimes when we are, certain inflections of our voice can kind of show if we're questioning or if we're sure, if we're confident or we're insecure, right? There's so many different ways of us communicating. So these components, let's kind of break them down. So let's break it down with when it comes to words. So what are some words that can be helpful? Let's take it from the Quran, right? In Surah Al-Taha, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, when Musa alayhi salam was, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala commanded him in Surah Al-Taha to go and talk to Fir'aun. Now, Fir'aun is a tyrannical ruler. He has so much control. He has so much power, and he has committed murders of little children. He has caused so much strife and hurt and pain, and he's done some horrendous things, right? And Prophet Musa Islam, let's also remember that at that time, there was a warrant out in his name because there was an accident and then somebody had died. Now, Musa alayhi salam is told by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, go and speak to Fir'aun. And in Surah Al-Taha, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in verses 43 and 44, go, both of you, meaning to Musa Islam and Harun alayhi salam, his brother, to Fir'aun, for he has truly transgressed all bounds. Speak to him gently, so perhaps he may be mindful of me or fearful of my punishment. So when I read this in the Quran, there was shock, honestly, because I had read this before, but you know how sometimes you read the Quran and it's like you don't really fully absorb, and then you read it for like the third, fourth time, you're like, whoa, what's going on here? SubhanAllah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells Musa alayhi salam to speak gently to this tyrant on the land. And then it's followed up. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala describes to us that speak gently so he may perhaps be mindful of me or fearful of my punishment. So speaking gentle words can actually help a person to absorb words, to take a lesson in, right? For example, how many of us have kind of just shut down? Let me share an experience, and maybe we have so many immigrants here, so maybe y'all can relate too. Have y'all been in a position where your parents have told you, or perhaps another elder was trying to teach you math? For me, it was spelling, right? And it's like, spell this word, and I still remember it's monster, right? Spell monster. And I'm here, English was not my first language at that time. And it's like, okay, no, that's not right. You're spelling it incorrectly. Try again. And it's like, M-O-N, M-O-N-E. And it's like, then it's like, no, do it again, do it correctly. And suddenly I'm overwhelmed and I'm just sharing random words that are, all over the alphabet, no sounding words at all. And, the adult is getting angrier and angrier. So what's happening to me is I became emotionally flooded as a little kid and I couldn't even think straight, right? And so when we're emotionally flooded, logic doesn't come to us necessarily. I forgot where I was going with this. Anybody remember where I was going with this? What now?
You said shut down.
Right. Okay. So you can shut down, right? And when you shut down, because there's so much emotional overwhelm, so what can help is that using gentle words actually helps us absorb better, as opposed to harsh words or words that are or even attitudes that are commanding, right? So what we want to do is kind of this is something Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has prescribed or recommended to us. Speak gentle words, even to tyrants. So think about our relationships. Think about that annoying coworker, right? Or think about like that difficult relationship. We can try to use gentler words, softer words with those relationships. Now, does that mean that we completely let go of what we stand for? No, we can still stand for what's important to us and still use softer, gentler words, a softer demeanor. Doesn't mean that we're weak for using softer words. You can actually be assertive and still use this gentle tone. Okay, so and then let's talk about body language, because that was the second part that we talked about. Our body language, our tone, our facial expressions. So when we're talking about this, what comes to my mind is, okay, so John Gottman is a researcher. And in the 1990s, what he did was he started this lab and he wanted to study couples, marriages, like what made marriages thrive. And at that time, the belief was that if you had deeper conversations and if you really had disclosures, you shared about your life and about those things and had deep conversations, that's what made a marriage thrive. And what he found in interviewing, and he had hours and hours, hundreds of hours of couples just talking to each other, because he was trying to find patterns for those couples who were on their path to divorce and those couples who were thriving. And he's like, I'm not finding much here. There's hardly any talk here about deep things. What he actually found was this pattern of these mundane conversations. Hey, how's the chicken? Is it good? And couples were talking about, oh, look at the weather. The weather's nice, huh? So really like mundane, normal conversations. And what he found was that those couples, when they're talking about these mundane conversations and one partner talks about something normal, then the other person turns and then gives them attention. Oh yeah, tell me more. Oh yeah, did you look at the weather? And so that person would turn towards this connection cue. They call them bids, but cue for connection. And they'd be like, oh yeah, the weather's pretty good, right? And they'd respond. Whereas those couples who are on a rocky place, what would happen is when they would mention something normal, there would be either two responses. Either they would totally ignore, right? So they'd turn away from the connection cue and be like, okay, and, or they would be turn against them, right? So their connection cue was met with like contempt. Like, you're always talking about the weather. Do you have nothing else to talk about? You see? So it's like, that's what he found. He's like, these little small ways of them connecting was actually what led to these relationships that are thriving. Now, how does this tie into when I'm talking about relationships and nonverbal and tone and everything? Because tone matters. It's when they were turning towards the connection cues, it wasn't just words. Sometimes they would just be like, yeah, So, and that was enough. It was sufficient. So in our relationships, we sometimes think about these grand gestures, right? I need to do this with my friend to make sure we're really close. Or you know what, with my mother, to show that I really care. Perhaps I need to give her a big gift or like do exactly what she's wanting. But really, it's about those small moments. It's about those small moments. And if you think about the hadith, right, like small but consistent acts, right? Consistent good deeds are actually really are those. I'm forgetting exact verbiage of the hadith, but it's something along the lines of good deeds that are consistent. They really, Allah loves them, even if they're small, And if we're thinking about these little bitty interactions, like, hey, the eggs are really delicious today. Yeah.
I want to tell you the hadith, but I want to.
Yes, please tell me.
Yes. وقليل مستمر خير من كثير.
Jazakallah
I don't know
khairan.
what does it mean.
The most
Exact in English, but I don't know here.
The
Perfect.
most beloved deeds to Allah are those that are consistent, even if they are small.
Jazakallah khairan to both of you. So yes, this hadith kind of describes that these small acts, this is actually charity. This is sadaqah. We don't realize that even when you guys came in here to this meeting today, right? Perhaps somebody initiated a salam, assalamu alaikum, and made you feel welcome, right? That's charity. This is you getting closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and making space in that person's heart. And y'all, we don't know how much hurt sometimes some of us are going through, right? Some of us are feeling very excluded or maybe even oppressed by certain events in our life. Or there have been stories of how, sometimes it's disclosed that people actually they're going through these suicidal ideations, these thoughts of ending their life. And sometimes a small thing, a small salam, a small act of moving their person, like sit here, right? At a gathering can mean everything. Like, oh, this person actually wants me to sit next to them, or this person noticed me. It can mean a lot. So when this is a power, this is a rahmah, this is a mercy that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave us this voice, gave us this body language. And this is, there's this Dr. Jill Bolte. She's this neuroscientist. And what had happened is she spent her whole life learning about, doing all this work on neuroscience. And then one day she had a stroke and she was bedridden. She was paralyzed. And through so much grueling work, subhanAllah. And what she did was talk and educate and describe and teach, right? That's what she did. And she spent months on a bed. She lost her capacity to speak. She couldn't use the left side of her brain, is how she described it, right? And then somehow through this rigorous work and physical therapy and her mother's help, she was able to learn again. And now, but she only has access to the right side of her brain. So she's able to do all these other things. But how easily we take for granted this gift that we have to connect with others, to spread cheer, to give charity, to ease somebody's pain, right? To share some of that mercy. So we want to really, really make this something that we practice with everybody, especially with those relationships that matter to us. Okay, so here's what we're going to do. We talked about how tone and all of that is super important to us. what I would like to do is if I could get a volunteer up here to just try something out. What I'm going to do is have them read a phrase and they're going to come from an intention. So we talked about, right, like words matter, and then also our body language and everything. Now, at the foundation, deep, what helps the most is our heart and our intention. That's why we talked about the nafs. Okay. When we're talking from our ego, when we're talking from that state where we're completely mindless, we can be very selfish or hurtful. We can cause a lot of harm and pain, right? But when we are, and this requires constant purification, tazkiyah, purification of the heart. This requires us to kind of slow down and be like, okay, where am I coming from right now, y'all? Like, am I just snapping at my kid because I just wanted to get that time to myself, and right now I don't have time for you. I did just too much. Is this really how I want to connect with my child? Or do I want to connect with my child right now and I can give them a few seconds of my time, right? Like, we just need to correct our intention, right? So what I want to do is kind of go back into taking words and how it can sound really different. And when we're coming from from a certain intention or a certain meaning. Okay, so if I can have a volunteer come up here, or 2 volunteers, and they're just going to read this. Or would you guys feel more comfortable just pairing off? Pairing off is better? Okay, so let's do that. What we're going to do is pair off, and I'm just going to give you guys, so I'll do a demonstration, okay? So what do you think the meaning is that you derive from me speaking in this way? Are you sure you can get this done? What do you think my intention was behind that? Or what's the meaning that was behind, are you sure you can get this done? There's doubt, condescension, undermining. Exactly. That's exactly what I was conveying. So on the paper, literally, it's like your colleague has a way of agreeing to things, but not making them a priority. You're worried that they're not going to get this done. Like, you ain't getting this done. Remember, you talked about the preconceived notions about a person. Like, this person ain't going to get this stuff done. And so when I'm speaking like this, right, that's what I'm getting across. So what I want you guys to do is just kind of practice these and see what it looks like on the other person too, and how it looks like on yourself. Just so, because many times what happens is we're on autopilot, okay? Or we don't realize our expressions and what they can look like to others when we're talking. So what we want to do is see what that's like, and then practice it be coming from an intention that's grounded in more of husn al-dhan. Can somebody share with me what husn al-dhan is?
Assuming good of others.
Assuming good of others. Yes. So assuming good of others. Now, that doesn't mean we have to be delusional. Okay. If this, for example, this employee was actually had a difficulty in kind of getting things done, right? It doesn't mean that I'm just going to assign them everything. But what we can do is still assume well of them and communicate from that place. And then when it comes to my actions, I can take proper precautions if need be. Or I can share, here's what we can do, right? Like, this is going to be my deadline. So anyway, going back to.
I can take a picture and post it on the TV if you'd like.
Okay, that would be great.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Let's take a picture of this. But I'm thinking how maybe you just share one prompt. What do you think?
Okay,
Are you too many?
So what I'll go ahead and do is go like this, and I'll go like that.
Okay, perfect. So each table, do we want to do it that way? The guys are together. The 4 guys or 5 guys, y'all can go together. Or maybe pair off. Maybe pair off.
Move to the right or just stay here?
Whatever's comfortable for you guys.
Okay, I got.
Then let me just turn on the TV real quick.
Okay, great. So choose any scenario. Okay. And the top one is the phrase that you're going to be using. You're going to put it up there too first. That's kind of hard. I wish I printed more. My bad. Okay.
Sure.
Huh?
This is the first scenario.
It's vertical. Can we rotate it?
Oh, wait, what? Oh, sorry. It was rotated on my phone, but.
Okay, so what you're going to do is just take that first phrase and then just kind of act it out. Choose one meaning, okay, and act it out for the other person and see if they can kind of figure out which meaning it was.
Oh, I already read it.
And y'all can read through it. It's not a secret, but they can guess it's the meaning. Right?
Okay, there you go.
Or like
We already did the first. Oh, we didn't go through the
okay, so the
So you take the first and then choose a meaning. Yeah.
You can. The top one. Yes. Oh. I need to take a picture. Let me see that. I'm gonna post it on the fan, for my personal. I'll post on the Rise by Someone thing so everyone knows. Thank you.
You didn't seem like you were like no, you didn't seem too down about it.
Okay, sure. You just and then the next person chooses meaning they want to type. No.
That's the experience.
I posted on the.
About that, it's so fun. I mean, I thought I was up here. Or I'm trying to get you out.
Should I go to the next?
Yeah, I'm actually gonna stop it in 60 seconds.
Yeah.
Well, I was definitely see. I thought
I wish I could have, I'm seeing the friend and how could
Okay, so I switched it.
Okay, there's gonna be about a minute and then we'll go back. So try these scenarios. I'm gonna give about 50 seconds.
Are you gonna
Whichever one you want to do, whichever one you want to do.
I think I know.
It's A, that's like, yeah, it's good.
Hey, you move your chair to do this. Yeah.
That's definitely like, I emotionally.
No, actually.
I think it's.
Yeah. He's like saying like.
Yeah. Yeah.
That sounds like a.
There was like strange sentence I came across that people said that depending on how you phrase it, it comes up with like 7 different meanings. Like when you pause, how you say it, like what inflection you have is like let me get that sentence.
Okay, I'm sure we can stop. Okay, folks, we are going to wrap up this exercise and then we're going to bring our attentions back to the front. Okay, so curious about what your experience was for the exercise. How many of y'all felt like, yes, my expressions were understood, like the way my tone of voice and everything, it was pretty clear? Raise your hand. Okay, how many of you felt like, oh man, I wasn't able to get it across, I feel? Anybody? Okay, sort of, kind of. Okay, so what this kind of tells us is, right, many times what ends up happening is we choose our words really carefully, but there's this underlying intention that we have or feeling that's driving our words. So what we may want to share with our loved one is something along the lines of, you know, if you could please pick up after yourself, that would be really helpful to me. And it comes off like, if you could please pick up your stuff. Okay, that'd be really helpful. It's the same words, but there's contempt, there's anger, there's frustration riddled across. And so the words are not heard that we chose carefully. What is read is the anger. What's read is that, okay, I am a nuisance, I'm a bother, and you know, there's a label on my head and all of these other things that we do. It is conveyed, right? So what we want to do, it's really, really important for us to kind of take a step back and regulate ourselves. It's really important to identify our emotions, right? How many of us are in the practice of labeling our emotions or kind of getting in touch with what we're feeling in the moment? Oh, wow, mashallah, a lot of us. Okay, so how do you guys end up doing that? Would anybody like to share how what's going on? Like when you guys are getting,
So when I'm reflecting, I do reflecting a lot when I'm driving or when I'm alone in the car because I feel like that's the best time. You don't have anyone else besides you, so you really think about your actions, what you did, how the other person perceived, and stuff like that.
mashallah, that's brilliant. Like how many of us are in that commute and stuck, and then you're really making that alone time count for something to reflect and then kind of go back into what I'm feeling. Okay, so anybody else want to share how?
Yeah, I was just gonna say I started journaling, just emailing myself, just to understand my emotions, and then I would use music like when I'm driving to feel my emotions.
Okay, yeah. So feeling your emotions, getting in touch with them. So the opposite of that is like push them down, suppress, and just keep soldiering on, right? But you guys are describing taking that time out to feel it, to journal and write about it, to think and reflect on it and label them. I saw a hand up here.
Sometimes when I'm in the moment, I won't realize that, again, like my tone is being off a certain way, or I'm feeling this emotion really strongly and it's influencing the way I act or talk. And so we were just talking about like if we're feeling really embarrassed or if we're, for example, feeling angry, I tend to notice it in my posture or the tenseness of my jaw. So sometimes tracing that back and thinking like, oh, my jaw is really tense, like I must be really angry, and then reworking it from there, like, okay, maybe my tone is off, let me compensate for that a little bit and make sure my tone is like extra nice, my words are extra nice.
Excellent. So many of us aren't able to kind of detect the emotions right away, but we feel it in the body. right? So that tension in the jaw. Some of us feel a lot of tension in our fists or even in our gut. Like our gut, our abs are really tightened and our breathing is faster. So these are all cues for us to be like, hold up, what's going on with me, right? What's happening? And the dua I said at the beginning, and many we've heard again and again, رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقهوا قولي. Hazrat Musa alayhi salam had said this, right? And he's describing that his chest feels constricted, right? And his tongue feels like it has a knot to describe that. So Musa alayhi salam is so in touch with his physical sense of self as well, of how that leads to emotions. And then in the verses after, he also describes, I'm scared, right? Basically, my chest is constricted. What does that kind of tell us? That's what we feel when we feel fear. So yes, excellent. So these are ways that we're able to, so really kind of describing those emotions, being in touch with our emotions is super important. Okay, so let's talk about, so you guys must have heard this, right? That we have been blessed with one mouth and two ears for a reason, because we're supposed to listen more and speak less. So how do we listen? I don't think, there's so much emphasis placed on us speaking well and to speak assertively and to come off, in a way that's confident and all of those things, and not enough emphasis on listening. There is a way, like listening is so important. It helps the other person feel understood, right? And it also helps us with patience as well. So how do we listen? What are some of those things that we can do? So here's one thing, and I'm taking all of this out from Dr. John Gottman's work. He has this listed, right? So focus on being interested, not interesting. This comes from, some of us have this anxiety when we're in social situations and they're like, okay, I got to make sure I got to keep up with everything. Can't leave an awkward silence in between. So got to stay interesting. So what are we doing? We're going back into ourselves, into our minds and keep thinking about like, here's what I got to say. Here's what I need to say. And listening is not about that at all. It's about focusing on the other person. Let's think about the Prophet Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. Prophet Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam turned his entire body towards a person. When they would be speaking to him, he would turn his entire body, make that connection, right? That with his eyes, he would make that eye contact. And then even when somebody would be holding his hand, he was never the first to let go when shaking hands. The other person would let go, and that's when the Prophet ﷺ would let go of their hand as well. And this is the way that he showed care and connection and being present. So what we want to do is really focus back on that person, where they're coming from. So we want to hear their words, and we can't hear their words when we're constantly thinking about what words I need to say next. Also start by asking questions, right? Like open questions. Have you heard of open and close-ended questions? Okay, yes. Close-ended questions are those questions that end up with an answer of a yes or no. So do you like ice cream? Yeah. The end. Done. Conversation over, right? As compared to when we ask questions that start with who, what, where, why, how, right? So when we ask those questions, it can kind of give more of an answer. So taking an interest in that person would be like asking, so, you were talking about your children. How are they doing? Or that project you were working on last time, how's that going for you? Let's avoid big questions like, okay, how's life? And that can be kind of intimidating, right? Or that dreaded question, tell me about yourself. No, make it a little more like connected to that person. Another way to listen is, ask about their goals or visions of their future, and then really, really tune in with all of your attention. And then another thing that we kind of don't consider is when we're talking to somebody, have you guys ever had this interaction with elders, especially where they're talking, and then you kind of glaze over and you're like listening and you want to give respect, but you've glazed over, right? And so, but what helps is for us to stay engaged, again, ground into your intention that this is something I'm doing as this is something good for myself. This is me doing charity. Like, many of us don't have a lot of money to give away all the time, but literally this is charity, all giving a smile or connecting. And then doing small things like nodding. Oh yeah. Oh, right. This shows connection as well. It shows you're listening. My mom on the phone always, you know, when I'm talking to her in our Urdu/Gujarati language, she's like, "Hokare diya karo." And I'm this word hakare, I'm like, what does that mean? And she's like, just say, huh, yeah, you know? So I know that you're listening and you're not doing something completely different. So it's like, you know, in between, and even doing that in real life with a child, or like, yeah, interesting, can be really helpful. This is a way that we show the other person that we're listening. Okay. And then, let's see, what else did I want to say? Yes. And then paraphrasing what the speaker is saying. So when you're talking to somebody, we can kind of summarize like, or paraphrase whatever they were saying. So for example, if somebody was talking about, you know, a coworker's describing, oh, you know, I did this spreadsheet and it was really difficult. And then this and this happened and nobody was listening to me. So paraphrasing, okay, so it sounds like you had a really difficult situation right there with your spreadsheet. And that right there just shows that person, yes, that's what I'm having. Or even reflecting their feelings back. Sometimes people don't know what they're feeling and they're just sharing certain things and then kind of telling them, okay, that sounds like you're sad. And even if you're wrong, and they may say something like, no, I'm not sad. Okay, then what's going on? It still shows interest, right? And this is still a way of listening. Last thing is let go of your agenda. Kind of bringing it back to the first point, right? Like, don't focus on being interesting, but interested. Let go of your agenda. Instead of, so for example, between spouses or between your parents or siblings, right? Instead of the agenda being like, I'm going to make them understand completely. Instead, let go of that and really see where they're coming from. So what happens is when we don't let go of the agenda, it's like we're trying to control the situation, right? We're trying to tell them what to do. So what are we doing? We're supposing I know better than you. Let me give you the solutions. And that's just not the case most of the time. People usually, they are living their situation. They have the answers. They just need somebody to listen sometimes. Okay, so what happens though, right? Like some of us don't know when a loved one needs help or am I supposed to give them advice? Am I supposed to like listen to them? What am I supposed to do? So one of the things that we can do is ask them, hey, do you want to be held? Do you want to be helped, hugged, or heard? Like, just kind of make it clear. Just ask, do you want to be helped, hugged, or heard? Many times what I hear is like parents just want to tell solutions. Or maybe you're reaching out to a friend and all they're doing is like, okay, maybe you're just pouring your heart out. You're going through some difficult situations and they keep giving you, well, maybe try this. Maybe you haven't done this. And what you're really just wanting is like, can you just hear me out? You don't know my situation. And so just kind of prefacing this with like, okay, tell me what you're needing. I want to be here for you can help to clarify. Okay. And then how to speak, you know, we're bringing it back to the gentle words, using good words. And now let's talk about conflict, right? Let's talk about the tough stuff, difficult conversations or conflicts. What can we do? So what John Gottman kind of describes is begin with the positive instead of the negative and express appreciation and gratitude instead of criticism and complaining first. When you do that, then you can kind of fill that in with what you need later. Have y'all heard of I statements? I statements, many of us have. Okay, raise your hand if this is the first time you're hearing of I statements.
Is I statements the one that you did for an activity a while back for softball before? Like I feel this, I feel that. That one?
I don't even remember if I did that with you guys, but yeah, maybe. Yeah. Yes. So what happens is a lot of times when we're in a conflict, we blame the other person or we end up shaming the other person because we're so dysregulated, right? We are overcome with anger or embarrassment or you know, disappointment, whatever it is. And what ends up happening is we start blaming. You always make me feel this way, right? Or you did this to me, right? So that's what the blaming can sound like. And shaming could be like labeling them. You're so lazy every time, right? This is what it can sound like. And that doesn't help. But instead, to switch that from you to I, taking accountability for your own emotions can be really helpful. And you're still kind of conveying your needs, you're conveying what you're feeling. So there's a little formula, and you don't have to necessarily follow it, but it's I feel when you, because. Let's shorten that actually. I feel because, and then I need. Okay. So, for example, say the situation is somebody like, and we're talking about loved ones. You don't use I statements with professionals or somebody who came to fix your car, a car mechanic, or you don't use this with, your professor. You use this with those relationships where you're trying to build that vulnerability, where you're trying to get close and have those connections, right? So you use these I statements and this formula. So let's talk about, say they interrupted you. You're talking and then you're bunch of siblings and you always get cut off by the other siblings, for example. So you're talking about something and they're just like, yeah, but I wanted to tell you guys. And that makes you feel disrespected and hurt, right? So it's saying, you're always cutting me off. Like, what's your problem, right? Instead of that, apply the I statement. What would that sound like? So it would be, I feel, you describe your feeling, and then you say, because, and then you describe the situation, and then you say, I need, and you describe what would be helpful, right? So who can kind of help me with that situation? Somebody cut you off, your sibling cut you off, or somebody just put in the words. Ready? So I feel frustrated, disrespected, right? So I feel disrespected, I feel frustrated because anybody.
I don't have a chance to speak.
Because I didn't have a chance to speak. Okay, what would help, or I need, what would you say?
Hear me.
Hear me.
To hear me out. What would help is to hear me out, or what?
To hear me.
To hear me more, exactly. And it's as simple as that. Mm-hmm.
So, my question is, so at the heat of the moment, sometimes you don't always remember to approach it that way. What would you advise folks to remember approaching conflicts like the way that we just mentioned? Because at the heat of the moment, it's very easy to, blow up, right?
So relatable. Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, it happens in friendships with your family, I'm sure with the spouse too. So.
Absolutely. So he said, in the heat of the moment, I'm not about to use an I statement. I'm going to blow up, right? It's like, okay, somebody just cut me off. And it's like, are you serious? And so, yes, it's because you're overwhelmed. Your entire nervous system is kind of taken over and said, you have been disrespected. And so our protection, our armor comes forward, and our armor is going to look, there's fight, flight, or freeze. And some people get argumentative. That's the fight response. Some people are flight. And what they do is they just kind of leave. They're like, whatever. And some people freeze up. Freeze usually happens when we're like, I can't fight or I can't run away, right? And so shutdown would be like, you're just not hearing anything anymore. You've just completely shut down, right? They're like, hey, Earth to Selina, what's going on? And so that can absolutely happen. So what we need to do in that moment usually is many people, so I practice cognitive behavioral therapy, but also somatic therapy. And there's a reason for that, because cognitive helps with the mind. When we get that waswasa, or when we get thoughts that are coming from nafsul amara, right? That lowest, that place where we're just arguing to win, or we are coming from this place where we're mindless, right? What can happen is that we are, when we're coming from that place, we just completely, wait, what were we talking about? I'm sorry. You're going to see me get off track all the time, and y'all are going to have to pull me back on.
I think you were on the right track. My question was, at the heat of the moment, it's very difficult to remember, the phrase that you mentioned.
Right.
Conflict.
So yes, I was talking about the thoughts and then the body. Okay, so sometimes we deal with our thoughts and we want to think of thoughts that are helpful and realistic and based in the present moment, right? But guess what? Some of us just can't get there because our body is completely overwhelmed with these emotions and these body sensations. And that's where the somatic therapy comes in. So, in simple terms, what we can do is attend to our body. So, you know what Elisa just shared? She described, like, in that moment, you take a moment. First thing is create a pause. Create a pause in that moment. And according to the Prophet Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, we can say, A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim, Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim, right? That creates a pause. We can also do, change our positions. And this does help. I did this when my kids were little and I was really, really angry. And they're these two little teeny babies. And I am like, they're driving me insane. And I'm this big, scary monster. And suddenly I just laid down on the floor because I was doing this. And then I'm like, and they were like, has my mom gone insane? Right? But I'm laying down on the floor and suddenly you can't do this anymore. Right? It just completely changes that buildup of emotion and that, you're kind of on a roll when you're angry. So changing the position. You can also, according to Prophet Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, that there's fire that builds in you. It feels like heat when you're angry and frustrated. So taking water to splash it, to drink it, even, in current therapy, we've also found that what we do is change your temperature, right? So cool water, if you dunk your face in cool water, or if you hold ice cubes, it's the same idea. Like water cools us down. Another form of therapy is do the opposite, right? So if your hands are clenched, loosen up your hands. And then your face is going to be really clenched and grit, right? Like you're gritting your teeth. You have this frown on your face, the scowl. Turn it into a softer expression, a smile. So a softer smile, that's a sunnah. Opening your hands, what does this look like, y'all? This is a form of DBT therapy, no joke, y'all. And this is literally what they found. This looks like dua. It looks like dua, right? We are surrendering ourselves to Allah when we open our hands. We're saying, Ya Allah, take over, right? And they found that the same thing helps. So your question about, like, in the moment, in the heat of the moment, how am I supposed to switch? Well, we have to create a pause. And that pause can be a few seconds, right? But when we create that pause, whether it's through stepping away, disengaging, like, okay, I need to take a break. This is too much. We verbalize that. So what we don't want to do is, like, we're in a heat of the moment. We're kind of in a shouting match, and then you just turn and walk away. And that's just going to, that's us kind of, it can be a power move, right? Like, forget this in your face. I'm leaving. No, what we want to do is, okay, we are both not in a good place. I'm just taking a break. I need to take a break. I don't want to say things that are going to be hurtful. And that can look like you're, softening your hands. That can look like you're taking a deep breath. Lots of times taking a deep breath can help, or a few deep breaths. What are some of the things that you guys are doing? Because I know there have been so many hands with the I statements. I am sure many people are doing their own work. So what are some things that help in taking that pause? That pause, or kind of in the heat of the moment, to speak from a place that's more helpful. Mm-hmm.
I think that it's helpful to, like, name my emotion out loud. So if I just say, like, if I just pause and I'm like, I'm really frustrated right now, and then I think, like, recognizing that and the other person recognizes that, it kind of calms things down.
Okay, so if I'm like, you just don't get me, this is what you're doing, do what it looks like to me, okay? You just don't get anything. What is your problem? And then you would just say,
well, I think it's like, if I'm feeling like what you're feeling,
okay.
and I can feel myself like I'm communicating badly, and like the split second when I recognize that it's, like, coming from emotion, if I just say it out loud, it helps me, like, get more in.
So she just replaces it with all that, verbal diarrhea that was about to come. Instead, she's like, I'm feeling really frustrated right now, right? So labeling that emotion right in the moment. Mm-hmm.
So my follow-up question to that is, so from what I understood, I think your core point was to focus on getting space for both individuals. So I remember you led the conflict class, I think last month or the month before.
Oh, that wasn't me. I think that was somebody else.
Oh,
but,
somebody
mhm.
else. So there are those types of people who like to deal with conflict directly, like they want to tackle it head on,
Yeah.
and then like certain family members are like that, right? So how would you approach giving space in that particular situation? Because in the heat of the moment, right, the other person might just forget or they won't come, or they would have forgotten what they did. So how would you best tackle that? Like, would you always give space to a conflict, or
Mhm.
would you sometimes also approach conflict directly, like head on?
So perhaps tell me if I'm not understanding correctly, right? But oftentimes what happens is that we have different types depending on our attachment style, right? We may approach conflict differently. So say if we are somebody who is anxiously attached, we need a lot of reassurance. So in the heat of the conflict, it's like, no, you can't walk away. You need to tell me right now. We need to figure this out right now. No, if you're walking away, that's not okay, right? So you're urging the other person, please tell me right now, and we need to talk about it right now. Is this what you're referring to?
Yes, because there's different types of ways to approach conflict, right, with different personalities.
Yes.
So I was wondering if giving space is always the best course of action.
Mhm.
Sometimes there might be conflict where you might need to approach it directly. So I just wanted to get your perspective on it, since you're the professional.
Inshallah, here's what I can say. Oftentimes when we're pushed to say something and we're not ready, we're going to blow up. That can often happen, right? If we are not regulated, and if we're not, and we're being pushed and egged on, and like, you need to fix this now, and we need to talk about it. So it really depends on what state you're in. If you're not in the right state and you feel like it's not going to help, then space is best. But if you feel like you're okay, sometimes we can give that reassurance, right? But here's another thing. We can't control the other person, right? And this is really about ourselves first and in front of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Sometimes the other person is asking for things we cannot give them, or in the way they're wanting them. So sometimes what's most helpful is to focus back on what words am I using? What are my actions? And think about, is this sufficient in front of Allah? Because it might not be for that person. That person may want you to agree to every single thing that they have. Otherwise, we're not walking away from this. I need for you to be completely on board and admit that you were 100% wrong, or whatever it may be, right? And the thing is, we can't give that to them all the time. And in that case, sometimes we will be at a place where we're not in agreement, right? But we, in front of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, did our best when it comes to what is in our control. What's in our control is our words, our body language, our tone of voice, our action. Now, what's not in our control? The other person's words, the other person's understanding of the situation, what they interpreted, right? What they took from your actions, right? Or their level of satisfaction. This stuff is not in our control. So sometimes we're not left at like, oh, everybody's on good terms. But then we have to trust that whatever's out of our control is in the hands of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, right? And as long as we've done our effort, then we can kind of move from there, inshallah. I hope that. Mm-hmm. Okay, what other questions are coming up in our mind? Okay, so let's go over some scenarios then, right? And then we can come up with what's worked best. And it can kind of bring forward what strategies work. Okay, so say these are some of the triggers that people have, right? And we have about 9 minutes before we end. But so some of the triggers that we have are being corrected, right? So some of us may have friends or family members who are constantly correcting us, or we feel constantly judged, right? Like, what are you wearing? You should be wearing that. This is not appropriate. Or, why do you talk this way? You shouldn't be talking this way, right? And that can be a trigger for us. So say somebody keeps criticizing in a disrespectful manner and keeps pushing themselves on you, right? And you're not feeling comfortable. What do you do? What way do you communicate? And have people kind of encountered certain situations like this where people are being very critical and very in your face constantly, right? Or crossing boundaries? What do we do? Mm-hmm.
I think a pretty common phenomenon that a lot of people can relate to is maybe you're in the bushes and there is an elder who comes and tells you like, oh, you're not doing this correctly or that one. And I feel like in that situation, what always works best is to just like smile a lot, thank them for their correction, and even if they insist on that type of thing, just like really appreciate them for even noticing or like saying that, and then you don't have to implement it based on your own judgment, and then just again make them feel heard, because a lot of the time that's where I feel like a lot of that criticism is coming from, and then make yourself an exit, like, oh, I think I have to go to this thing, or I have to like just give yourself an exit somehow or somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
But like give them that attention that's probably asking for, and then just leave.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so you described, I'm going to break it down, right? You described thinking well of them, having your manners, right? The gentle words or whatever it may be, whether it's validating, and then having your boundary, right? And then kind of creating space or moving forward. Okay. Mm-hmm.
I think context can also be really important. Like
Yes.
the relationship with the person, what the person is like. So if it's someone that you can have like a mature conversation with, and you can do a little bit more communicating with them. If it's someone that may not have a certain like maybe insight, personal insight, you might try to be kind, but like avoid that interaction in the future, just in a way that could protect like your boundaries, like you guys were saying.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess I would try to assess like what type of situation is this, and is there like a productive resolution moving forward?
Mm-hmm. So she described, depending on the context. So if this relationship has the capacity where I can use my influence, and influence does not guarantee change, right? It does not guarantee change, but there may be some difference. So what are some sources of influence? We can request. It request something like, it hurts my feelings when sometimes this and this happens. It would be more helpful, like using that I statement. We can express, we can educate, right? We can kind of let them know, this and this happens sometimes. And with our elders, sometimes this may not go well, like sharing articles or educating. And with some, it does. It does, especially when we make it like a family effort. Like, I've been learning this and this really helped me. And I realized this about ourselves. Like, it's more helpful to do this, right? Like to not, instead of being critical, looking at those things that are more helpful, right? So yes, using our influence can help. And then sometimes the issue is that that influence or that capacity is not there. And when that capacity is not there, sometimes what we can do, especially if it's a blood relative, right? What we want to do is take, and this takes emotional intelligence, take where they're coming from, put it through this little, interpretation machine, because what we want to do is, instead of just see their surface level, what's going on, what's their intention, right? Lots of times it's coming from a different place, either from insecurity or love or care, but it's coming from someplace. And then we validate, and then we go ahead and do what's important to us. So for example, if you're receiving a lot of criticism, what we can say is like, if they're saying, the way that you're talking, this is not appropriate. Okay, I hear what you're saying. I hear where you're coming from. Thank you for sharing. And then you don't have to share that. I'm going to keep doing this, right? But you can move forward. But sometimes we have to we can turn and look at where they're coming from, what their intention is. And that's a heart softener for us. We don't need to verbalize or excuse them or absorb that information and make that a part of ourselves, right? And believe it necessarily. But what we can do is kind of take what's most helpful for us to get closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and apply that. But it's 9:57. Does anybody else have any other questions that we wanted to kind of bring up? Okay, so from today, there were so many people who shared their things. I thought that was really helpful, y'all's reflections. What are some takeaways or some things that you guys heard from each other that stood out to you from today? Anything at all?
I think how you communicate matters a lot, and even if you think you're communicating a certain way, it might be received. So you just have to be aware of that at all times.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I think just kind of what you were saying, like when you're saying something harsh, even if it's true, by saying it harsh, you're gonna, breed resentment and negativity rather than if you do it the gentle way. It's much more effective.
Mm-hmm. So speaking with gentleness. Mm-hmm.
I like not like he as a prophet also had emotions, and so like when we're feeling those, like think about whenever he felt those emotions, like he physically felt them and then acknowledge like this is what I'm feeling. So like we're always wanting to be like our prophets, and so like being like they were human too. They also felt exactly what I did. But how did they respond?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, learning from the prophets and Prophet Musa alayhi salam and how he labeled his feelings, and labeled his sensations, and then asked for help. He described his need. In the later verses, he even asked, "Can you please send my brother?" Right? So he's asking Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for a need, and Allah knows everything, but we're allowed to ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for our needs as well as ask others. What other things, takeaways? Mhm.
I just had a question. I was thinking, like, imagine if you're someone who's currently learning how to read your emotions, or like beginning to learn how to read your emotions. What do you think like a good like strategy for that would be? Like in the moment you're having an intense emotion, you want to learn what it is.
Yeah. And so sometimes talking about it, journaling, but in that moment, sometimes there's this emotion wheel, right? And having like a list of emotions in front of you, like, I don't feel that. I kind of feel this. There's even an emotion tree, like good and bad. I feel bad. That's all I have right now. Right. And then it kind of branches off. Do you have something to share about
I
that?
was just gonna say, it's okay if you don't understand your emotions in the moment, but it's good if later that day or the next day you can write and reflect on it, and just writing it out will help you to understand it in hindsight, and then when it happens again, you'll understand.
Excellent. Okay. Anybody else? Mhm.
So what I wanted to add was it reminded me of the Quranic ayah. So by mercy from Allah, O Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, you were lenient with them, and if you had been rude in speech and harsh in heart, they would have disbanded from about you. So pardon them and ask forgiveness for them and consult them in the matter. And when you have decided to rely upon Allah, indeed Allah loves those who rely upon Him. Right. So it's amazing that the mercy of the entire world, like Alameen, is the Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. And he was told to be kind with his companions and stuff of that sort. And we know we can be harsh with our most closest ones, but he was the message to the entire world, and we can't be that with our closest ones.
So true. Mm-hmm. Yes.
I had a question. Okay, when you were talking about like when you're being like emotionally dysregulated, like pause, walk away. Like if you're in like a public setting, right? Like for example, if I'm here, if you're like at a dawah or something, like how do you approach that where like eyes are on you, can't do all this stuff?
So you're saying like there's an argument between two people in a public setting?
Not argument, but maybe there's like a topic that's come up and that causes you to feel threatened, or someone's talking to you about something and maybe they're being passive aggressive or you're reading into it or something. But how do you like kind of in that moment like regulate yourself?
And you can't leave
Yes.
the setting. You're stuck there.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Like
So
if you're hosting or something.
yeah. Have you noticed any body sensations that you usually have? Like, for some people, they start to get very fidgety or they start feeling a heat, right? Have you noticed anything like that?
Yeah.
Okay, so sometimes what can happen is, so say I get really embarrassed by something somebody said, and I'm sitting in a corner and I'm noticing everything kind of building up, right? And what can happen is just by you paying attention to your body sensations, subhanAllah, a lot of times just to us cueing in, your body starts to kind of calm itself. And this has happened so many times in our sessions with my clients. And Faria, maybe you can add to this too, because Faria is also a therapist. But oftentimes what happens is I ask them, okay, where are you feeling this? What's happening? So say, for example, surprisingly, many people will say in my throat, right here, right? They feel it here and in their chest. and they're like, I feel it in my throat. And the second they start paying attention, suddenly they're like, okay, they start to breathe automatically. And so the tightening, because there's more space. Another client actually had described, I feel a fire in my belly. And the more they paid attention to it and just kind of paid attention, just observed without trying to change anything, they were like, okay, I just started breathing and my breathing just kind of quelled the fire. So subhanAllah, something that can help. Faria, did you have some other ideas of when you're in a public setting?
I couldn't really hear.
So she asked that if you're in a public setting and you're getting emotionally flooded, right? And you are having, is that correct? Like you're overwhelmed with emotions and you can't leave. Is there something that would be helpful?
I think definitely the managing your own emotions in the moment, but also I think it would be helpful to keep in mind that you can always ask for more time. So if somebody is approaching you and they're being confrontational, it's not something you want to talk about, or you feel emotionally really flooded and overwhelmed, you have the right to not talk about that, right? You can say, hey, I want to talk about this. Let's talk about this after the party. Let's talk about it later. I'll give you a call. And so I think a lot of times people feel pressured during confrontations to have to respond right then. And the truth is you don't have to do that. You can take time to collect yourself, to think about it, to process, to journal, to whatever it is. Because when you do have that kind of conversation, you want to make sure that you're being present and mindful in the right headspace. And so
I love that, because sometimes we just don't give ourselves permission to let it be weird or awkward. Like, okay, this is what it is. That went weird. And it's like, so what Faria's saying, that's what reminded me of, like, let it be awkward.
And I was gonna say, if you feel just super overwhelmed, you can say, excuse me, I'm overwhelmed, give me a second, and you just step away. It's totally fine.
Okay, here's another thing I do with the children, the kids, and I taught my own kids too, right? Like the breathing exercises are great, but sometimes having something to follow can be helpful, and you can quietly do this. Like for kids who also have testing anxiety, right? They just end up breathing, and I call it roller coaster. I saw this somewhere, roller coaster breathing. You're going up the roller coaster, you breathe in, you pause, and then you go down, you breathe out. You breathe in, you pause, you go down. And sometimes regulating that breathing, it activates that parasympathetic or that rest and digest calming response, right? And I like that better too than just the,
Another thing so much you're saying was about the body scan. So the idea is that you feel all the parts in your body and you tense them and release them one at a time, and you're just slowly releasing all the tension in your body. And it's kind of hard to do that in the moment, but if you have a moment to yourself, you can just do a body scan, just tense and release. Drop your legs, your arms, everything, and you'll have all the tension slowly leave your body.
So I hope that helps. Yes.
I don't know. I think it may be hard. Like I want to hold my hands and then breathe. What will I do?
Yeah.
When I have like breathing. Sometimes like it's weird, but I think in like a funny maybe thing happened with me this day or like in a day before. Like thinking with a funny thing, it's made like because like you are let me say like all you are thinking about this problem and what's happening. You are angry.
Yeah.
All your like thinking is about that's anger. And then when you think about the funny situation that happened with you, you may like maybe less anger. And
I love that.
yes,
So switching your, mind and really
in a different
visualizing.
thing, yeah.
Because guys, when we visualize something, like I remember I was one of the teachers that when the kids were younger was describing like, oh, there's been a lice infestation. And then I actually saw a little, lice on the child's head. And I started feeling itchy all over, right? Because I'm just imagining, right? And then maybe you've heard of like somebody describing a lemon and suddenly you start to salivate. So your visualization of thinking of a fun or funny moment, that can really help too. I love that.
But also, is laughing therapy like a thing? Like when you like get upset, like you just laugh about it? Like that's crazy. If I get like frustrated or if I'm like, this is absolutely ridiculous, I will laugh and like I don't like feeling upset. So I will just like laugh and I'm like, I literally just use laughing therapy. But
So laughing Absolutely. Laughing can help to change our states, just like we talked about smiling can, but we don't want to suppress our emotions either. Okay.
I'm very self-aware. So that's why I'm like, no, I know I do this when I'm upset. Like it just happens.
Okay. Well, this is the end of our program. I'm still here if anybody wants to ask questions, but I also want to release everybody who has to go home. So Jazakallahu khairan. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala forgive for everything I've said incorrectly and for all the times I forgot things, and y'all help me get back on board. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala also bless everyone here and yes. Okay. Jazakallahu khairan. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.
So,
But yes, if anybody else wants to share their idea